Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. Let's talk about the 10 books that I read in the month of June. I read 5 of the 10 books physically and the other 5 I listened to on audiobook. For the genre breakdown, I read 2 literary fictions, 2 non-fictions, 2 mystery thrillers, 1 romance, 1 historical fiction, 1 YA romance, and 1 YA mystery. Similarly to the month of May, I did not have any 5-star reads in the month of June. I did have some new favorites though, so don't worry, lots of recs to give you guys. But I think I want to do this wrap up how I did my May wrap up. Usually I like to go from my least favorite book to favorite book, but since there's no like 5-star grand finale to build up to, I'm going to talk about these books in the order in which I read them. I also feel like that will help me jog my memory to remember what some of these books are about and how I felt about them, because for some reason June, especially the beginning of June, just feels like it was 3 years ago, and some of these books I really don't remember much about. So let's go in order. So the first book I listened to on audiobook this month, and that is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo. I actually got this rec from Daisy Edgar Jones. I heard her talking about it in an interview, and then I also saw she posted a picture of this book on Instagram, so it was available to listen to on Libby, so I downloaded it and listened to it. And overall, I enjoyed most of it. I gave it 3 stars. So it's basically an account of various Black British women, and they're all kind of connected in some way or another. So it'll be a few chapters on one woman, and then a few chapters on that woman's mother, and then the next set of chapters will be on the woman's grandmother, and then it'll be chapters about the mother's friend. And the last chapter ties all the women's stories together and kind of tells you how they're all connected, how various people are related to one another, and there's some things you uncover in the last chapter that you didn't realize while you were reading it. And overall, I thought it was so beautifully done. It was beautifully written. It was very poetic. It almost read like nonfiction to me because all of these women's stories and accounts of their lives felt so very real. So if you told me these were real women, I would totally believe you. There were definitely some stories that I connect to more than others, and some women's stories I enjoyed reading about more than others, and there were some that I was just kind of like meh about, so that's why I rated it somewhere in the middle at 3 stars. The next book I read is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This is her memoir, and it is accounting various stories of her life from the time she was like a young teenager to her early 30s. And I think if you are a woman in your 20s, especially my millennial girlies, you should read this. I think you will relate to it a lot. I really loved the beginning of the book, especially because she was telling all these stories about being on instant messenger and talking to boys and having crushes, and it was just so nostalgic and relatable to me. And then the deeper we got into the book, it was more stories about her life when she was like a hardcore party girl and had all these different flings, and those parts of the book weren't as relatable to me. I still enjoyed reading about it, but it wasn't any advice that I felt like could apply to my life or that was groundbreaking and I hadn't heard before. This book made me laugh and it made me cry, and I really enjoyed my time reading it. The next book I listened to on audiobook, and that is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I gave this book 4 stars, and if you're thinking about picking this one up for yourself, I highly recommend the audiobook because the concept for this book started out as a podcast, so it translated really well into audiobook format. And also the audiobook is narrated by John Green himself, which was such a treat to listen to. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to him tell his own personal stories, and it just made the book a million times better. I really, really love this one. Basically, there is a wide array of topics covered in this book. Everything from the Piggly Wiggly to the board game Monopoly to sunsets. And he kind of gives you some random trivia type facts and background knowledge about each of these topics, and then he will relate it back to his personal life, and he has little anecdotes about each topic, and I just really enjoyed reading about it. Some topics I definitely enjoyed the chapters more than others, but overall I really thought it was a cool concept and loved listening to John Green. The next book I read was my favorite of the month, and that is My Policeman by Bethan Roberts. This one was almost a 5-star for me. I think my final rating is probably like a 4.75, but absolutely adored this book. For context, it takes place in 1950s Britain, where homosexuality is illegal, It is literally a crime that you can be arrested for and go to jail for. As far as the plot goes, we get two POVs in this book. One is from a woman named Marion, and the other is from a man named Patrick who owns an art gallery, and they both fall in love with the same man. It is a town policeman named Tom. So basically we're getting this like love triangle story. Marion and Patrick both in love with the same man and having to share him. I basically felt every single emotion possible towards each of the characters in this book. At some point I loved all of them. At one point I hated each of them. At points I empathized with all of them. At points I was so frustrated with them. I just felt such a wide spectrum of emotions reading this, and I thought it was so well done. I really loved the writing. I liked how nothing was spoon-fed to the reader. I feel like for most of it you were kind of held at arm's length to where you had to really deep dive and read between the lines to figure out what was going on. If you aren't aware, this is being adapted into a movie, and Harry Styles is playing Tom, the policeman. I think Harry Styles is the perfect person to cast as Tom. Even if I didn't know beforehand going into this that this was one of Harry Styles' favorite books and that Harry was cast in the movie, I would be picturing him the whole time as Tom anyway, because just the way Tom's mannerisms are described in the book and his actions and the things he says, they feel so Harry Styles. So I was just picturing him the entire time reading this, and it made the book even more enjoyable, and I'm just so excited to see the film of this. This book was beautiful. Definitely my favorite of the month. Next, I listened to One of Us Is Next by Karen M. McManus. I gave this book 3 stars. This is the sequel to One of Us Is Lying, which I read last year, so you need to read the first one before picking this one up. All the characters from the first book show up in the second book, but they are more background characters, and the main characters in this one are new to us, except for one of them is a sister of one of the main characters of book 1. So we were introduced to her in the first book, and now she is one of the main characters in book 2. This one was similar to book 1. It's a high school mystery. Someone's murdered. They're trying to figure out what's going on. There are these school-wide texts being sent out where students are being blackmailed and having to play this truth or dare type game to reveal information to the whole school. I know the series gets compared to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder a lot, and I personally like this series a little better. I think this series does a really good job of introducing a wide cast of characters but making them all very distinct from one another, so I never get confused about who's who, and I don't have to use too much brain energy to like solve the mystery. I feel like the clues are introduced at a good pace, whereas in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder I feel like it's just a lot of info dumping and I had to use a lot of brain energy. This one is more you can just sit back and enjoy the mystery and enjoy the ride, but overall it was just okay. I kind of guessed the twist before it happened and it wasn't super memorable. Next, I listened to The Club by Ellery Lloyd. This one has been on my radar ever since it was picked for Reese's Book Club earlier in the year, and I was gonna read it because I love a good thriller, but since then I heard quite a few negative reviews and I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I would say I was pleasantly surprised because I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. It reminded me a lot of The Guest List by Lucy Foley, but not as good. So if you've read this one and you liked the vibes of it and the atmosphericness of it, but you just wanted more, I highly recommend The Guest List because I feel like it's a very similar vibe. Basically, it is about all these celebrities, these VIPs, who have to be invited to join these clubs that are set up all around the world, basically like a resort style club. And we're following this one particular club where all this drama unfolds. There's all these secrets that are revealed. I feel like the writing was pretty convoluted and I don't know, there were a lot of characters to keep track of that I just wasn't that invested in, so it wasn't really holding my attention and I'd have to like go back and re-listen to things that I missed. I couldn't just like sit back and listen and enjoy. I really had to pay attention, which I don't love a lot of times in a thriller if I'm not invested. It kept my interest just enough, just barely. I did think the twists were good. I wasn't expecting them and I liked the ending. I like how everything was wrapped up, but overall it was just okay. Next, I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh, and I gave this book 4 stars. It is about our unnamed protagonist who is dealing with depression, dealing with a lot of mental health issues. Her parents have just passed away, so she's grieving the loss of her parents as well. She ends up finding this really unorthodox therapist who prescribes her all this medication, most of which are sleeping pills, and she ends up taking an excess drug cocktail of all these sleeping pills in an attempt to sleep for the majority of a year, hoping that she'll wake up feeling refreshed and renewed and that most of her mental health issues will be gone. This is one of those books that while you're reading, you're just like, what? I don't know, it was interesting. It's a lot of dark humor. It's definitely satirical, and I feel like I don't entirely know the point that the author was trying to make, but I did enjoy my reading experience overall. I feel like it's definitely not one that is for everyone because, like I said, it's a lot of dark humor. It's an interesting take on mental health issues, but I was picturing everything in this book so vividly the entire time. It reminded me a lot of Bunny and that trippy, like, what is going on kind of way, but it wasn't convoluted. You still had a good grasp on the plot. Next, I read Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is about a girl named Jules who is down on her luck. She is desperate for money, so she ends up taking a job as an apartment sitter at this really bougie historical apartment building in Manhattan that doesn't really have the best reputation. A lot of shady stuff has gone down at this apartment complex, and she starts to witness it for herself firsthand when she's there, and she ends up befriending another apartment sitter, and that's really all I want to say because a lot of shady stuff goes down once she befriends this new apartment sitter. So I gave this one 3 stars, and I would have given this book more, but to me it was very, very predictable. I predicted what was going to happen from the halfway point, and the whole time I was hoping that I was wrong because it felt so very obvious to me. But I think that's because I watch a lot of scary movies and I read a lot of thrillers, so I've seen this same setup like several times before in different movies. And if you aren't a huge thriller reader or scary movie watcher, I think this will come as a shock to you in terms of the twist and the ending. But to me, it was very, very predictable. But I still enjoyed my time reading it. It was fast-paced, short chapters. Each chapter ended on a cliffhanger, which I love, so you want to just keep reading. But yeah, enjoyed my time reading it. I'm hoping to read more Riley Sager this year, and I hope his other books aren't as predictable for me as this one was. Next, I read The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han, and y'all, this almost took the top spot for my favorite book this month. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did, but I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. It gave me that very nostalgic high school crush summertime feeling, and I just loved it. I thought it was so good. It was the perfect light, fluffy, fun summer read. I thought I was going to be way too childish, but to me it was just the perfect amount of like nostalgic, and I was able to really get into the story. I really liked the characters, and I just thought it was super, super cute. If you don't know what this book is about, it is basically like a love triangle situation. This girl named Belly goes to the beach every summer with her brother and her mom, and they stay with their family friends, which are 2 brothers, Jeremiah and Conrad, and then Belly's mom and Jeremiah and Conrad's mom are best friends, so it's like family friend situation. She kind of has this love triangle thing going on with Jeremiah and Conrad, so it's like which brother will she choose, which brother likes her more, that kind of thing. Those are the vibes. Very cute summer crush high school vibes, but I just ate it up. I really loved it. I think this is the perfect beach read, pool read. I read this in 2 sittings. Definitely will be picking up the other books in the series very, very soon, probably this coming month, and I cannot wait to read it, cannot wait to finish the show. I'm just in love with it, and I'm also gonna pick up All the Boys I Loved Before very soon too, because of how much I just loved this book, and I love the way Jenny Han writes high school characters. I feel like I was so skeptical to read a YA romance because I felt like I'm so far detached from that point in my life, but it really had the opposite effect and just made me feel so nostalgic, and it just was a fun escape to read. And now I'm in my YA romance era, and I'm just gonna like pick up and devour every single one I can find. And the last book I listened to on audiobook, and that is Living Dead in Dallas by Charlaine Harris. I would say I give this book somewhere between 3 and 3.5 stars. This is the second book in the Sookie Stackhouse series. My husband's aunt loves this series, so she gave me the first one to read and then she gave me the second one, and I felt really bad because I just hadn't gotten around to reading the second one and she had asked me about it, so I decided to listen to it on audiobooks so that I could read it quickly. And I actually like this one a lot more than the first book because I feel like the first one was kind of setting up the world, introducing you to the characters, and now that I know them and have a grasp for them, I could just really enjoy like the mystery and the romance of the story. And I thought it was super cute. I think the audiobook is well done. If you're not familiar, these are the series of books that the show True Blood is based off of. So it's basically about Sookie Stackhouse. She is a waitress, she is telepathic, and the only people's minds she cannot read are vampires. So she ends up meeting this vampire named Bill, and it's kind of like refreshing when she meets a vampire because her brain isn't constantly like reading their mind, and she ends up forming a romantic relationship with Bill. There is a subplot of mystery in the background in each of the books where there's usually like a murder, some kind of tension between the humans and the vampire world. And I'm not the biggest vampire girly, but I feel like this book does it really, really well, and I really enjoy the setting and the characters, and it's just a fun time. Okay guys, those are all the 10 books that I read in the month of June, so that is going to conclude this wrap up. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you so soon in my next video. Bye guys.